I know we had a really amazing connection, an incredible connection between the two of us, John Bonham and I. There's just no doubt about that.
I mean, you recruited John back when you were with the Yardbirds in the late 60s. Do you remember the first time that you met?
Well, yes, I went to see him play with Tim Rose, Tim Rose, for those who don't know, he wrote Hey Joe, and if he didn't write it, he certainly was the one who was known for singing it, and Hendrix, of course, did that.
Yeah.
I went to see him play in a club, and at the time, it was at the time when I was putting Led Zeppelin together and sort of headhunting people, and I did actually have a drummer in mind because, of course, well, it was not of course, but actually, this incredible talent that was there in the Midlands, the reputation of John Bonham hadn't really come outside of the Midlands, but he got this gig with Tim Rose, and he was playing in London in a small club, and I heard him and I thought, this is absolutely, he's absolutely amazing. He's definitely the drummer. I felt him play, actually. It was quite an experience. So there were now sort of a possible three, and John Paul Jones heard I was getting a band together and called me out and said, I hear you're putting a band together, would you consider me on bass? And I said, okay, marvellous, because I'd played with him in the studios in various sessions. Robert had a short time when he played with John Bonham, but John Bonham was off and, playing around and starting to make a name for himself outside of Birmingham. And certainly John Bonham had never had the opportunity to play as John Bonham like he did in that, because he was given this opportunity and vehicle to really, really go for it. And he jolly well did, but everybody did. Everyone moved into a realm from what they'd done before, right up here in this category up here, and we're playing up in sort of the heavens, if you like. Bonham's playing just brought so much to everything. It was, was so much more than if another drummer had have played them. So there was so much spirit within the band. Of course, you had four people in Led Zeppelin, which were sort of musical equals, if you like. I would say so. But John, I think, with drummers, they're the backbone of a band. They've got to be the most reliable one in there.
Half the engine room, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Because in the recording world, that's what it was. It was a recording world, and that was really inspiring. But on the stage, the numbers would, once the numbers from the albums went into the set, then they would sort of mutate and change, and you could, every night there would be different sort of aspects to them that would come out of the playing together. So when you're talking about, or when we discuss like the energy of playing, or it was the fact of being able to go on and have this communion with the four musicians, and not really knowing exactly what it was going to be like, because it would be different from the concert that was the night before that, or the night before that. They were all mutating.
Epitomizing the era of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, they lost drummer John Bonham in 1980 from an alcohol overdose.
Well, quite clearly, when we lost John in 1980, we've been talking about this bond that we had, and it's almost like a musical ESP that we developed along the way. What were you going to do? People came to us, and I know they mentioned drummers not with a commercial mind there when they were saying it was purely for the best will in the world, but there wasn't, you'd say, yeah, it's a great drummer, but what do you actually do here? Do you say, listen to this, this is what we improvised one night, now you learn it and we'll play it the same every night? Of course not. So, so at that point in time, it was a measure of respect for John Bonham's part that he played, and plus what we felt amongst what Led Zeppelin was.
After John Bonham's death in September 1980, Led Zeppelin decided to call it quits.
Well, there wasn't any way that one would get a drummer in after, John passed away, and say, well, this is what it is, and, learn this bit and that. It just wouldn't have been honest. Bonham, he was just the most inventive drummer that ever came around rock and roll. There's no doubt about it. I mean, every drummer would say the same thing. It was a great loss to music, when we lost him.
Well, John Bonham was an extraordinary musician who had this incredible technique that was head and shoulders over anyone around him when he was still in his teens, and it's just absolutely phenomenal. And he kept, finessing his technique and his vision of the drums. He had a definite vision to drums and how they should be played and how they would fit in with the band, and also how they would be soloed as well in his solos. And it's without doubt that his technique was, as I say, beyond everybody else's, and that's why he's so looked to and looked back to with such reverence and love, really, because he was absolutely extraordinary.
So since John Bonham died and Led Zeppelin broke up, you've collaborated a little bit with the remaining members of Led Zeppelin, and you've done some reunion gigs, but generally there doesn't seem to have been much enthusiasm for any of you. You haven't done very much together, and so I'm just wondering why that is, and also, if John Bonham hadn't died, do you think that Led Zeppelin would still be going today, or do you think that something else would have broken the band up by now?
Well, the last part of your question is a difficult one. I know that before he died, we'd already discussed what the next album was going to be like, what the approach was going to be like. But we discussed, John and I had discussed that we were going to go more back into the guitar power aspect of things. So it's hard to say. I know we had a really amazing connection, an incredible connection between the two of us, John Bonham and I. There's just no doubt about that. So I'm sure whoever, if somebody had gone off to do their solo project, we still would have been coming back together again, because we really enjoyed playing together so much. And I know that John Bonham loved Led Zeppelin music and played it at home nearly most of the time. So